Hello, folks. This is Chuck from the Brownie Camera page. Hope you all are doing well today. I'd like to talk about the wonderful number zero Brownie Camera. Um, this camera was produced from 1914 all the way to 1935, a 21-year stretch of time. It is odd for box brownies because, as far as I know, it was the only 127 box brownie camera. Um, it's basically made of card with wood construction on the inside, some wood construction. It has two viewfinders, reflecting viewfinders that I basically find useless. And it has about as simple a latch as you can possibly get. This is one of the most basic of Brownie box cameras, or box cameras in general, except it does have a bulb feature, which means it is capable of keeping the shutter open for time exposures, which is kind of cool. I've done a lot of time exposures with my other number zero. And that works by pulling up on the tab. And if you can see this, let's see. You lift up, you can let it go, leave it on a table once it's, once you've tripped the shutter, and it can take a time exposure until you either push down on the tab or you flip the shutter release again. The shutter release on these is not foolproof, and you should know and remember that when you're shooting with any box camera like this. It's a one-way motion for the shutter. So if I trip the shutter this way, it has taken the photograph, and then we wind the film. What you don't do is trip it and then move it back. It does not work that way. So it's a trip, wind, trip, wind. And so you have to get into a habit when you're shooting these of either you trip it and you wind to the next one, which is what I do. So it's ready to always go. So you know that when you're going to trip that shutter, it's going to shoot. Or you get into the habit of tripping it and then remembering you must wind before you trip it again. I always wind it again because I don't want to lose the image that I've made. The viewfinders, which again, I find them basically useless. I'm used to pointing and shooting these cameras and kind of knowing the field that it's going to shoot, but it does give you an idea what it's going to shoot. This one, of course, is for vertical. When you do it sideways, this one is for horizontal, which is kind of cool. It does not have any kind of a tripod. Whoop, let me turn that off. I'm sorry. It doesn't have any kind of a tripod socket or anything like that. So when you're doing the time exposure, again, I don't mean to jump around, but when you're doing the time exposure, put it on a table or something like that if you want a sharp photograph. And speaking of sharp photographs, these cameras are capable of taking extremely sharp photographs, even though the shutter is basically 1/30th to 1/40th of a second when it's in really good condition. When it's not in good condition, who knows how slow the shutter is. Now this camera, because of certain features on it, I've determined is made between 1914 and 1917. This other one that I have that looks exactly the same is not exactly the same. And because of very slight differences, on the website, you can, and I'll leave the link below to the page for this. This one I've determined was made between 1917 and 1928. Well, let's stick with this one. This one I just got about 3 weeks ago. I've been dying to shoot with it. And so let's load it up with some film and I'll get it ready to go. Now, there are some certain things that I do when I'm loading some of these cameras because they're not intuitive as to how you put them back together. And so it's better, especially when you're rolling film onto it, to do it correctly the first time so that you don't fumble, the roll of film doesn't fall out of your hands and you destroy a roll of film. In these cameras, I use usually 100 ASA and usually EFCA R100 ASA, which is this film. I use that because it's a little bit grainier than T-Max, which I sometimes will slice and roll my own 127 film since it's not available. However, for this camera, I like to use a little bit grainier film, and I develop it in D76 at a hotter a hotter temperature than is advised to make it more grainy. Mostly because I just like how this camera, how number 0 Brownie cameras produce grainy images like that. So this camera is used for I'll use this camera only for certain subjects that will benefit from that sort of treatment. So first what we do is we'll simply open it. That's all that happens. Then you turn and pull this out a little bit. Again, let me show you that again. Don't force anything on these cameras or they will break. So you gently pull as you're turning, and that pulls away from the body. That makes it so that the film carrier, which is card and wood, glued wood, comes away. Now, I'm going to pull this out and leave it in the same position as it's supposed to go back into the camera. That way I know which way the spool is supposed to go and what spool goes where because of the film winder. Okay? So, I'm not going to put the take-up spool in yet, but I am going to put it, if you can notice that there is a, let me use, instead of my big fingers, you'll notice that there is a slot on one end of the spool. This one does not have a slot. This one has a slot. Let's leave that towards the winder. Next, let's open the film. Okay, I usually do this in subdued light, and I usually tell people too, with roll film, it's better to do it in subdued light. Not in absolute darkness, but in subdued light. It's just, sometimes there are light leaks that will happen around the first couple of images. And I'll gently remove some of this excess paper. Not a big deal if you don't. And you'll notice that this has a leader. So I will gently put that in. Everything's done gently. Then, with this pointing towards the winder, I'll put it into its slot, like so, and wind it on as it will be wound on from the camera. That is paper on the outside, black on towards the shutter, which will be in here. Shutter, black, paper on the outside. So I will wind this on to make sure that it is on and is not going to come off at all. And I put it on fairly tight, just a couple. Don't worry, there's plenty of leader paper before the film starts showing up. And I pull this out, and This goes right into where it's supposed to. You'll notice the spool ends go in. Spool ends are in, right? Okay. Next, you can see there is the slotted end of the take-up spool. Another way on this camera if you get disoriented is to notice there's a little dimple in here where let me see if I can do this right. There's a little indent right there. That indent is to accommodate this screw right there. It goes in, it gets closed, and you gently put this in while turning counterclockwise. Then as you, and let's see if we can show this. So you wind, let's see if I can do it that way. It's hard sometimes when you're looking at a screen when you're making these videos to know which way you're turning. So you turn this counterclockwise. You won't feel much. You won't really know that the film is going. So what you do is you wait. Up, there come the arrows. The arrows are telling you you're coming up to the number. There are the dots. And there is the number 1. Can you see that? Number 1. So now there's film across this film plane, and we're ready to shoot. We're ready to use this. So because of my system now, I know when I flip that switch, I've taken a photograph, I wind immediately, and then I'm ready to go for the next photograph. So there it is. This camera is basically at least 95 years old, and I'm going to shoot a roll or two with it this week and have a lot of fun. So load up your cameras, go out, and have fun. Talk to you guys later. Take care.